All right, hello and welcome to episode 20 of Plays Well with Others, our podcast about building and participating in effective teams and actually enjoying doing it. As always, I am your host, Andrew Moore, and I am joined by my illustrious co-host, Jess Agnew. So, episode 20. We've been doing roughly 2 episodes of this podcast a week, and with the exception of some issues outside of our control over the last couple of weeks, we've done pretty good about getting episodes out to you on Wednesday and Friday. And we wanted to take this milestone, and we call it a milestone. It's 20 episodes. That's 10 weeks of getting content out for you twice a week. And we were talking before this about how we wanted to make episode 20 a little special, a little more interesting. And one topic that always comes up is, what do we wish we had known? And Jess was asking, or we were discussing, what do you wish you had known before what? And I think the answer is yes. So whether that be career or podcast, content creation,
having kids, owning a dog, buying a house. There's 1,000 scenarios where I wish I could go back and talk to my past self and explain things to her.
So, as is our form, we'll start off with story time, and I think Jess has got the helm on this one, because when we talk about what do you wish you had known, and that sentence is sounding weirder and weirder the more I say it, but information for aspiring people. We'll go that direction. I think Jess has got one of the best examples of learning on the job or learning as you go and actually being pretty decent at it.
Yeah, it's funny because I went to college for anthropology and communications, and now I work as a VP of product and project management. So you can absolutely see how those two things have nothing to do with each other.
I don't know. They've shown to be fairly related.
They've been useful. The communication portion, absolutely. But every job I've ever had, so I worked at Best Buy in college and then after college, and I became really like the in-house expert on our POS system. So anytime there was something wonky with it or something that we needed to figure out how to manage, like our delivery system or something like that, I was always the one who got called to customer service to help figure it out for the customer. And then I went to Wells Fargo and I was an underwriter, and I showed another proclivity for technology. I got to know the system. I became a UAT tester. I started building these spreadsheets with these complicated macros in them where everyone in the division was using my spreadsheet. And then I got moved into a financial analyst role, and I started doing business analysis, and I started learning SQL on the job. And then I moved to another company and I became a compliance specialist where I did kind of internal auditing for compliance, and again showed a proclivity for understanding technology. And then I eventually moved over to technology, became a business analyst, and grew my career from there. And it's just so interesting when I think back on time and time again, I showed this proclivity for technology, this ability to understand systems and the logic of them and be able to reproduce scenarios and be able to build things and just be able to figure it out myself. I mean, I learned SQL myself by bastardizing other people's languages, right? Or other people's scripts, and then buying a book on it and learning it myself. And those things were just things that I learned on the job, because as a woman growing up in the 90s, I never thought I could be good at technology, at computers. It wasn't something that was really talked about or was available to me, which is why I have 2 daughters, and I try and do my best to expose them to that and make sure that they understand that that's absolutely something they can be good at, because it was something I was good at. And if I had known when I was younger, I might have made some very different choices in my early career. Have no regrets on where I turned out. I absolutely think I'm in the right position now, but I do think I would have made some different choices earlier in my career that might have helped me climb faster or maybe at least understand things in a different way and from a different perspective than I do right now. So it's just really interesting to think back on. I wish I had known what I was good at. Like, I wish when I was in college, I had really understood where my personal skill set really laid. Was? I don't know how to say that.
I don't know. Now we both have had an English flub. But I'm gonna actually disagree with you a little bit. It's more of the more of a polite disagreement. We were on a call earlier today, and we were talking about, in the spirit of what do you wish you had known, we were talking about what really makes for successful people, successful partnerships, and what makes for enjoyable interactions. And one thing that we sussed out, it was Jess, myself, and another leader at our company. We were talking about just kind of setting your ego aside and being able to ask the dumb person question.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
Being totally okay with not knowing. And yeah. I will say that's one thing that you're good at, Jess, but it's one thing too that I think a lot of effective people or a lot of happy people are totally okay with not being right.
Yeah.
And as a result, they become pretty good at just figuring stuff out. Because you can generally suss out how to do something through trial and error and simply asking people good questions for how should I do this, or how could I do this, or what's the one thing I probably shouldn't do.
And Andrew and I were in a conversation with probably one of my top favorite people to work with at the company that we work with right now. I mean, she's an absolute delight. She's also incredibly knowledgeable. She's working in tons of different divisions in the company, and she's so, like, ego aside constantly. She walks into a room, and 90% of the time she's probably the most knowledgeable person that comes into that room, and yet she's always willing to go, I may not be right about this, but this is what I think. What do you guys think? And the fact that someone at that level, with that level of expertise and that level of experience, is willing to walk in and say, I may not be right about this. This is what I think. This is what I'm coming to the table with. You guys engage with me and tell me if I'm, hitting at this right angle. Is there something I don't understand? And that elicits a response from the people in the room. And then she gets to learn, and nobody has a problem with an ego, and nobody feels like they're not valuable in the conversation. So, it's been my pleasure to have been exposed to a lot of people when I was coming up in my, career, who were like that, who would walk into a room and go, hey, help me wrap my arms around this. Can you explain this to me so I can really get it? And that phrase, help me wrap my arms around this, I want to understand it. I stole that from a guy named Denny, who I used to work with, who I thought was super smart, and yet he was willing to walk in and ask questions. And I stole that phrase, and I use it all the time because I think it's such a quick and easy way to represent, like, I'm not stupid. I know I can get this, but I don't get it yet. I need your help. I need you to walk me through this.
Well, I think that's kind of the core of, at least from an engineering perspective, what do I wish I had known? That it should almost be explained day one as you come out of college, trade school, boot camp, whatever. It should be explained day one.
You think you're smart. You think you know everything, and that's great. You should ask questions still.
Well, I was going to go a different direction and say nobody else has a clue either. Like, we just have a slightly more informed experience.
I was thinking of one particular person who I absolutely will not name, who walked out of college and into a career role and thought they knew everything, and were explaining to everyone how they should be doing their jobs better. And oh my gosh, sweet summer child, nobody wanted to talk to them because they were wrong all the time, so confidently. Just like so confident in how wrong they were. It was not a good situation.
Well, there's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So for folks that aren't aware, there's a progression of how much you actually know versus how much you think you know. And so people that are very new to a practice or to a thing think they don't know anything, and they don't know anything. And so they're down here kind of in the bottom left of the quadrant. And then as you progress, you learn a lot in a short period of time. So you think you know a lot, but in reality, you don't know a lot. And you progress a little bit more, and you know a lot, and you think you know a lot, And that's where you're kind of in the danger zone. Like, you could be an effective middle of the road engineer or middle of the road practitioner because you do actually know a fair amount, but you think you know everything, and that's a problem. It's going to prevent you from progressing. And then call it true enlightenment is when you really know a whole lot. Like, you're an industry leading expert, but you realize you don't know anything. Like, there's so much more that you could know. And we run into that a lot as you go through an engineering progression where not only are you learning and developing, but also so is the industry, so is the technology. So about the time you climb your way up to the top of the curve, oh well, surprise, we're going to introduce quantum computing, we're going to introduce AI, we're going to introduce we're going to turn Java on its head, and it's going to be entirely different, and you're going to go from functional programming to, stream based programming, whatever. Like, it's always changing, and you've got to have that perspective to set your ego aside and just be comfortable not knowing, because you're probably not gonna.
I will say, just kind of thinking back on my early career, one thing I also learned that was really valuable was when you ask for help or when you ask for someone to explain something to you, you'll find out how well they understand it. Because if somebody can explain something to you in simple terms, chances are they understand it really well, especially if it's something complicated and they can explain it to you simple and in a, like maybe use a diagram. Andrew, you're actually really good at this. Is one thing that I've really appreciated about working with you is you take concepts that are really technical and very difficult, and you can explain them to a business stakeholder who has no business even asking about it. But you can explain it in a way that they can consume and they can appreciate how it impacts what they are doing. And you can also tell when somebody doesn't know a lot about something when you ask a question, hey, can you help me wrap my arms around this? Can you explain this to me? If they explain it in the most convoluted, complicated way possible, chances are they may not understand it very well either. And that's not necessarily a bad thing about that person. They may not feel comfortable exposing their lack of knowledge, or they may not realize that they don't understand it very well. So it's a good opportunity to ask other people, to go do some research on your own, and then come back to that person and say, hey, here's what I think I heard, or here's what I think is right. Can you tell me if I'm explaining this correctly? And you explain it back to them, and you guys can actually get on the same page without you having to call them out on, I don't think you get this, do you?
Well, I think there's a slight caveat to that. So people really, if you can teach something, then you understand it really well. It's kind of hard to teach a complex topic without having a foundational understanding, because when you start parroting back the complexities, then your student's going to sit there with their eyes glazed over and say, I have no idea what this means. There's no foundation. But in a lot of cases, particularly in engineering, you wind up with these complex subjects and people with personalities that really respect the detail, and the detail becomes important. And so I've had a few people that have worked for me, have worked with me, that do this really well, riding that scale from simple to complex. And I've picked up a few things along the way of how to use more precise language, how to not assume that anybody knows anything, not from a condescending perspective, but from a more educational perspective, and really making sure that I cover as much of the foundation as I can when I'm introducing the topic, so that as you build upon it and you start getting from problem statement to solution, you've got all the tools you need to have a good conversation. So sometimes the details are needed, right? But
sometimes they maybe understand it very well, but maybe they aren't the right person you need to be learning from.
That's an excellent way of saying it, because we all know the academic type that really appreciates their topic of study or their practice and really understands it soup to nuts. But when you talk to them, you're on a different plane, man. You're just built different. I don't get it.
I have worked with those individuals as well. I tend to be able to tell them, hey, you're talking here, I need you to go down like 3 levels. Gonna back it down a couple for me. And most of the time they can do that. They can go, all right, let me scale this down for you a little.
I met a guy at a conference here in Nashville, and this has been 10 years ago or more. And we were just standing in the lunch line, and I was making conversation. I was like, well, so what do you do? It's a development conference, so usually my expectation was I'm going to get I'm a .NET developer because we're here in Nashville. But he said, I can't remember, he worked for some research firm, but he says, I write compilers. Oh, okay. Well, I had a programming languages class in college, and we had to write a compiler, very, very simple, rudimentary, and it ate my lunch. And so I start trying to ask this guy questions. Clearly, I have no clue what I'm talking about. Like, I know enough to be not even dangerous. Like, just I know enough to know the words.
You knew enough to know what a compiler was.
That's about it. So he starts explaining, and it goes to a depth that I could not have fathomed starting out. All right, well, here's the deal. I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds really interesting. Glad to have met you. I'm just going to go back to eating glue over here in the corner. But
That's
all that
awesome.
to say, sometimes the details are there, but you're not on the same wavelength as the person that's trying to impart the idea on.
You know, another thing I'll say that I've learned is just how much, and it's going to sound so broad and obvious, but I have a deeper meaning with it, how important language is. Because how you say something can have so many nuances, and it can be almost right, but not quite, because you don't understand it well enough, or it's not your area of expertise. For example, I was talking to my sister-in-law over the weekend, and she's a geneticist. Like, she's a scientist. She's incredibly smart, PhD. She's awesome. And my family has a history of certain genes that cause cancer, and we were talking about them because we've done, many people in my family have done the genetic testing and gotten the results, and another person in my family is about to do the testing to find out if they have the same gene. So we were talking about, the specific gene and what it means, and, it was interesting because I think my mom, someone said, well, if you have the BRCA1 gene, or if you have this gene, and she was like, everybody has it. Like, everybody has the gene. Like, that's not what that means. Like, what it actually is. And then she was explaining, like, the mutation on the gene that actually causes the gene not to work. If you have the gene, that's a good thing. The mutation's the bad thing. And it was so interesting. It was so funny because, she was like, oh, you're so close. But it's another thing I've learned in my career as well. Like, how you say something genuinely matters. And so sometimes people who are a little bit more educated on a certain topic might be like, oh, that's so close. You're really close to the right. You're really close to saying that right, but you didn't. Let me tell you why.
Well, I can appreciate that. There's, in the spirit of plays well with others, there's the aspect of the person that wants to be educated, the person that wants to learn. It goes a long way that you know enough to be dangerous, that you know enough detail to have part of the conversation. But then on the other hand, the educated one, the expert, there's some onus on you there too, that if somebody's shown the investment or the desire to know something, then you shouldn't just let them continue in almost having it, like being right there. Because if they've gone that far, they can probably take actually, you're really
Final
close.
step.
If you tweak it this way or think about it this way, then you'll have it 100%. Then now we've both come away better. It's almost like when you go to a foreign country and you put in the effort to learn some conversational language. Most places, I don't think the United States is one of them, but that's a different conversation. I think most places will appreciate that you put in the effort to learn some of the language. And if you don't get the verb conjugation just right, they'll usually let it slide as long as they can understand what you're saying. A good example, I've spent a lot of time in Mexico, and I've lost way more of my Spanish than I should have. But one of the first nights we were there, we were with a medical group, and my buddy and I were going as translators, and we had spent all day working there was a diabetes clinic, and there was a optician, so getting people glasses. And I've got the drill down. I know the phrases. I know what people are saying. I've got into Spanish mode, and we come home and we go to get dinner, and we were just wiped out. So we go to Domino's because, of course, there's a Domino's, and we're trying to order a stinking pizza and just cannot get it right. Can't get the verb conjugation. Trying to get every word perfect and being precise, and it's just not working. So finally, my buddy's passed out. He's gone. It's like, I give up. I don't care. I'm not even that hungry anymore. So I wound up resorting to pointing and making words that sound like the nouns that I'm looking for. And
please, this one.
It's just all I need. And the guy was working with me behind the counter, and finally got it together. But we left with a keep trying. You're almost there.
Aw.
Yeah, pat.
I appreciated the effort.
Yeah. Meanwhile, a lot of us English speakers, somebody has an accent or gets a word wrong. Actually, you mean. Okay.
Yeah, don't be that guy. Oh my gosh.
But so part of the other topic that we wanted to talk about is you've noticed some service interruptions over the last couple of weeks, and excuses. Recording a podcast is hard. Getting video and audio both out twice a week is hard. So we've done a couple of episodes, and I've done some personal content and some articles on if you want to make a podcast, what do you need to do? And what we've learned a lot. We've learned a ton from some of the intricacies of recording a remote podcast, because we're not in the same place, as you can tell. And so that introduces some complexity. I've learned recently in the past week or 2 weeks that there's a lot of infrastructure required for not just recording a podcast, like doing one episode, that's fairly straightforward. But 20 episodes in, it takes up a lot of disk space, takes up a lot of time, takes up a lot of storage. And this last week, I had trouble getting episode 19's video out because for some reason, I think my MacBook's disk space was full or close enough to full that it was telling me that, or it wasn't allowing me to upload the video or whatever. I think I've about got it licked. I have the file. It says it's 30 some odd minutes long, but every time I upload it to YouTube, it only uploads like 8 minutes. So if you know the answer to that, let me know. But I think I've got it figured out. But all that to say, we started out on this journey, and now we've got 19 episodes. I've got audio, I've got video, I've got raw files. All of that takes up a bunch of storage space, and so I've recently had to get a network attached storage device in the house, which is fun. It scratches the engineering itch, but now I'm having to build this content infrastructure to support the habit. So all that to say, a lot of stuff goes into making a podcast that lasts more than a few episodes, and had I don't know that I would have done anything differently had I known that. I think in a lot of ways, I did know it. I was just kicking the can down the road. But if I were to share advice, it would be just expect there to be a time when your laptop or your desktop or whatever is no longer going to support your production, and you need to start looking at solutions. And in my humble opinion, a single external hard drive is not the best answer, because I went through 19 episodes trying to limp along with that and reached a point where that wasn't working either. So there's not a whole lot when it comes to podcasting. There's not a whole lot of initial investment. you can get a few episodes out pretty easily, but as time goes by, you wind up having to put a little bit more effort into it. You put a little bit more time, a little more expense to keep up with all the stuff that you're doing. And in true technical hoarder, I don't throw anything away from a file perspective because you never know when you might need it again. But to close our episode out, Jess, I know I shared kind of what do I wish I had known when it came to podcasting, being, hey, you're going to have to get your infrastructure stuff together real quick. But I'm curious kind of your perspective too.
Well, I mean, it's no secret you're doing the technical heavy lifting on this, which I appreciate so much. The stuff that I've learned has definitely been much more around just how to configure the audio and the, getting the right webcam and making sure things are situated in a certain way. And I had to learn a lot about how to kind of configure things so that I sounded good and I came across well. And there were issues with my computer being a little slow, so had to switch devices so that I was on the right computer for the solution and make sure that my voice and video were actually synced up rather than like 20-second delay from everyone else. So there was the first few episodes, I think Andrew would say something and like 20 seconds later I would respond to it, and that got a little irritating. We were stepping on top of each other, so there was definitely just unfortunately, you need the right things. You need the right tools to do the job. So I'm very blessed in that I have a husband who was able to help me figure some of this stuff out because he already knew quite a bit more than me. And he bought me a bunch of stuff, and then I kind of had to learn how to use it. And he's like, "You want help?" And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna figure it out on my own." And then Andrew helped me instead.
No, I'm not gonna take that credit. I will appreciate.
I did learn a lot.
You did, and I do appreciate.
Thomas really did a lot.
Yes, we recorded one episode or part of a promo or something like that, and I cut it down. I edited as best I could and sent the mix down to Jess, and she texted me back like 20 minutes later. Travis has already ordered me a bunch of stuff. It'll sound better next time.
It was so cute too. He's such a good husband because I didn't even say anything. I just played it for him, and he was like, "Oh, go downstairs." And he went downstairs and did all this research for like a while, and then ordered me a starter, microphone and webcam. And he gave me one of his old ring lights, and he like got my little organization set up over here, and it was incredibly sweet. Like I literally didn't even have to ask him, and it was an investment of money and time on his part to kind of get me set up. So,
But it's exactly what I would have recommended anybody starting out in a podcast to get. It's probably what I would have gotten had I not already had this for music and such. So, there's the shout out for episode 20. I mean, Travis is the MVP.
My husband.
But so things that we wish we had known. We talked about things we wish we'd known before we started in technology, before we started in our careers. The key theme being just accept that you don't know everything all the time, and you probably know very little most of the time, and be willing to learn.
Your ego,
be willing to teach.
Be willing to learn. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you can take anything away from this episode, just generally don't be a jerk. Everybody's trying to learn stuff. Not everybody knows everything. And when it comes to podcasting, content creation, just roll with the punches, because there will be days where the electric company turns off your electricity for maintenance. And that will almost always be at the last minute before you're trying to record the episode that's supposed to come out the next day. Or your internet will go out for the same reason.
It's wildly specific.
It is, isn't it? Or you will...
almost like that exact scenario happened.
Right, or you'll run out of disk space, and you'll spend time and effort and money, and you'll invest in a NAS, and it'll take 4 days to back up all of the files before you can re-render the last episode. So what you'll see is probably episodes 19 and 20 coming out at about the same time.
Whatever works, man. So here's the one thing I will say is we're talking about how to be effective while still having joy in your life. And I think the main point of all of this is when you come to the table just with an eagerness and a willingness to learn and listen and hear other people, it doesn't just make you more effective, it also increases the respect and camaraderie and the joy that you're going to experience working with other people. So leaving your ego aside and going into the room and being okay with not knowing everything and accepting that other people are going to contribute things that you would never have been able to do on your own, it's a recipe for a much happier existence. And that, I think, goes across any aspect of your life.
Yeah, I think there's a quote or a pillow or something that says comparison is the thief of joy. I have no idea where that came from, but it's
somebody
fairly
needle
true.
pointed it somewhere.
Yep. But so this has been episode 20. You know what to do. If you've made it this far, really appreciate it. Go ahead and you don't have to pause it now. You can just go ahead and leave because we're done. But give us a like, a share, a subscribe, a rating. Leave us a review if you're listening on a platform that allows you to do so. Drop us a comment in the YouTube video that I'm sure will be longer than 8 minutes long this time. Just reach out to us, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You know where to find us. It's all the same name. Plays Well with Others, Andrew Moore, Jess Agnew. But again, episode 20, thanks for listening.